Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be talking about Apple's dynamic island. A lot of you guys actually requested me to talk about it, to create a video on it, and I'm going to do that. I'm not just going to be walking you through how to create something like this in Figma because that's fairly easy, but if you want my opinion on it, I'm going to share some thoughts on it, so at the very least you can get some unique value out of it, maybe a different perspective, because otherwise anyone can create this. There are already creators, designers creating this. There are already community files, Figma community files, which I'm going to share later as well, that have already been created on this. So let's just have a look at it, what it is. Okay, so fancy cameras, that's fine. Notch, powerful. Okay, so they've converted their hardware limitation into something more usable. So they previously had a notch which was unused space. Now they've converted it into something that can be useful. Sure, I mean, that's something that can be applauded to a certain extent, but until and unless you haven't used it, you haven't experienced it, you haven't frequently interacted with it, I'm not sure if it's okay to form a huge judgment about it or make or say that this is a UX marvel and all of that stuff. So but this is it. Again, you have really smooth interactions and all of that stuff. So I actually wrote a LinkedIn post about this, and I'm just going to share it or read it, and we can talk about this together. So I know Apple is getting a lot of traction for their dynamic island, and a lot of people are marveling at their brilliance for turning their hardware limitation to something useful and praising why UX matters and why it's so great. I mean, as soon as this thing came up, I have people in my feed just talking about this is why UX matters, this is why it's so great, this is why, again, it combines the hardware and software limitations and does something brilliant. I mean, sure, the hardware, combining the hardware limitations to achieve something, that's fine, but whether or not this is a UX marvel can only be validated once people start using it. Whether this is an interaction design marvel can only be experienced or can only be validated once people start using it for a longer period of time. I mean, did we just forget the touch bar we were all excited about but didn't really fare well? I know a lot of people who were really excited about the touch bar, but what did they do? They're not introducing the touch bar anymore in some of their Pro Max. I mean, and there are a lot of problems about that, but I don't want to get into that rabbit hole. Now, whether this is a UX marvel or another hit and miss, we'll probably know that once we get our hands onto it. But here are my thoughts. So what I liked: great that they came up with a way to turn their hardware limitations into something useful. The animations are slick and fluid. Wouldn't be half as cool if they weren't. So don't ignore micro interactions. These micro interactions, even something like this. So as you can see, this is a mouse. Imagine if you click on it, there's a tap sound or a clicking sound. If this sound or this gesture or the feeling that you get when you tap on something wasn't really there, you wouldn't get half as satisfaction. Same goes with the keyboard. If this was all touch screen, like even your mouse was touch screen, you wouldn't get half the pleasure using these things, or maybe the satisfaction. So good thing that there's an ability to have more than one app up there. So they've figured out how to actually have more than one app. One can be smaller, one can be larger. That's good because obviously there is some horizontal real estate, and the transitions are really great as well. And it's also quite responsive to touch. So even if you accidentally tap on the camera, it does really well to detect your intention to open the app. I don't mean detect the intention using some AI means. So it's just, again, the tap target is really, again, great to a certain extent. Now, what I'm dubious about, it's placed at the top, and the tap area is quite small. So it is small. It's not really as large as I would want it to be. Using it frequently would be a pain based on Fitts law. So obviously the tap area isn't as large, and then it's quite up in the mobile screen. So obviously you have to reach your thumb. So if you're using it from a single hand, then it would be quite hard to do so. You may have to double tap the home icon, that's what I do on my 6S. So I already have a 6S, and that's what I do to actually, even though this is a really small device, I actually use the double tap to access the top level elements. So you may have to do something like that. I'm not even sure if that's available in the new mobile devices, but on a larger device, just physically going there and actually reaching the top would be quite cumbersome. Secondly, if actual notifications may appear there or switch there or whatever, imagine you're trying to actually interact with something and then something else appears immediately and you may accidentally tap that. But there are ways, I think, in which they can navigate against that. They can probably add a vibration first, so at the very least you can be trained that there's something that's going to appear there and you can be conscious of it. So there are ways in which they can prevent that. the camera can get dirty. And no, not everyone wipes their camera every time they want to take a picture. If you say, hey, you may actually be tapping the camera quite a lot and that may damage the camera, or that even if it doesn't damage it, it may actually dirty it. I actually have heard, or at the very least seen, people that they're they're trying to justify Apple. They're like, hey, everyone actually wipes their camera anytime they're taking a picture anyway, so it's no big deal. I mean, no, I don't really know when I actually last wiped my camera, because I haven't had a need of it. But I think with something like this, especially if you're using with gloves, especially if you're using constantly tapping on it, it is going to have an impact, in my opinion. But obviously we're going to experience all of that once we actually get our hands into it. Secondly, do you know how easy it is to actually swipe open the notifications, and how easy it is to swipe open the dynamic control from the bottom left or the top right, the way it is right now in Apple devices? The reason for that is you don't have to be precise about it. You can just swipe from the up and down and you're going to get those notifications. Imagine if you had to swipe or tap on a particular area to get those notifications. Can you just imagine how hard that would be? So instead of just doing something like I'm just going to show it, something like this, you now have to tap a specific area to view the notifications. I'm not saying that's what they're doing here. Obviously the notifications panel can still be there, but I'm just trying to paint a picture that the reason why something, as even though notifications actually come from the top bottom as well, even though they actually exist on the top, that's why, because the tap area and the experience and the gesture is really easy to do. However, when you have to be really precise about it, can you actually do something or tap something like that if you aren't even looking at your screen? I can open my notifications or the dynamic control without even looking at my screen, but can you actually do that on the little controls? Like I'm just gonna come here just a second. I'm actually gonna come here I'm gonna come here and imagine you have something like this, the application playing around. Can you actually tap on this if you weren't even looking at your screen? Similarly, if we go back to the call thing, so where is the call thing? So probably not this one, but again, you get what I mean. Like you can't really tap on really small targets if you're not actually aware or looking at the screen. So again, that is going to be a hindrance. But coming to some more important points, it's a completely new pattern that people aren't used to yet, something that does not exist in previous iPhones and neither in other devices has a bearing on users. Introducing a completely new way of doing things has its cost and obviously produces some cognitive load on the user. So it would require users to learn something specifically new for a particular device, which is a huge decision. This is nothing that should be taken inconsequentially. This is something huge. And especially for a feature like this, which may be a hit or miss, which may actually exist somewhere sometime later on, it may not exist, so on and so forth. We don't know about its future, yet you're still making that decision to train them for something. It's a huge decision in my opinion. So let's see how it goes. The fifth one, additionally, for those praising Apple's brilliance on how they have used their hardware limitations to come up with such an experience, have you ever thought what would happen in the future if they figured out a way to get rid of the notch, or when cameras become so tiny that they don't necessarily need to take that much space at the top? Would we consider going back on this pattern? So this is specifically for those who are marveling at the fact that Apple combine their hardware limitations to provide an experience, so on and so forth. I mean, that's all well and good, but what happens when this hardware limitation no longer exists in the future? Obviously, that could be a possibility, right? Cameras are getting smaller and smaller. There can be different places to actually keep the camera, so on and so forth. If the camera or the notch no longer is there, would this be a pleasurable experience? Imagine if an Android device that already has a notch somewhere, obviously it's still a very thin notch and it's not really in the middle of the screen like Apple. If they actually created an experience like this, would you be fascinated about it? Would you be okay using it? If not, then this is something that we really need to think about. Is this decision only good because there's a hardware limitation, or is it essentially good despite the hardware limitation? And if it is only because of the hardware limitation, then that's going to matter a lot, especially in the future. So all I'm saying is whether it's a success or not from a UX perspective can only be validated when actual users get their hands on it and use it for an extended period of time. It's a bit hard to judge something so soon, so might as well give it time and maybe wait to see if it's actually worthwhile, rather than being an Apple cheerleader without even interacting with it. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not necessarily against it. I actually have my reservations, but it can be a success maybe. Even though, as I said, I have my reservations around it, but still, at the very least, let it get to your hands before being such a huge cheerleader and a fanboy about it. So now let's get to the actual design. So again, with anything, if you actually want to search for something that's new, you don't have to come to me, you don't have to go to any other designer, so on and so forth. Figma community is great. They actually start creating all of these elements directly. Or not this one, maybe we can use this one. So I'm going to get a copy because I actually like the frames around the device. I think that helps me recognize the device even more. So I'm just going to get that. I don't have to physically create it. There's nothing to actually physically create here. This is pretty simple. I mean, this is just a rounded rectangle. What is it? Like, it's not fancy. It's not something that's impossible to create, but whatever it is. So here is an example of it. So I'm just going to copy these two frames. I'm just going to paste them here, delete it, paste it here. So again, this is exactly what it is. So there's already a delay here. I'm just going to remove it. This is a message. So again, I can actually convert this message into something else. This is a basic auto layout. We have this particularly placed as an absolute positioning. So again, you can have some elements here, you can have some elements here. So I'm just going to actually create my own widget for Mattermost. So as a lot of you may know, I actually work for Mattermost, and I'm going to create a widget for Mattermost. So I'm going to say Andrew messaged you, and I actually don't like the positioning of it. I feel like it should be a bit on the left, so I'm just going to move it to the left. So probably 8 pixels from here. And as you can see, this is now unbalanced. It's actually 10.08. So obviously that's not something that I really like, but I'm not going to mess with it that much. I'm just going to make it 10 and 10. So now that we have that here, so again, Andrew messaged, we're just going to have these ellipses so it does not go a bit too much over the notification bell, or sorry, the camera. And then I'm gonna maybe have the Mattermost icon here. So I'm gonna go to mattermost.com. So here is the image. Let's just go ahead and actually place the image here. And make it white so we can see the image. And then we have this logo. Okay, that's fine. I'm gonna place it here. That looks good. I am gonna remove this Twitter icon. So now it's removed, and I'm going to go ahead and reduce the size of this Mattermost icon. So now that I have the size reduced, I can turn it to white as well. And I need to actually get the official colors for Mattermost. So I'm just going to go back to the page, and I'm going to just pick this particular color here. So here's the color that's actually being used on the button. So I'm just going to replace it here. And I think here maybe just actually converting it to something like this also might make sense. I also think this is a bit small, so I'm not sure if this is going to be a decision that Apple makes, but if it's like 9 pixels, I'm not sure if people would be able to recognize it. So maybe we can actually replace the whole image with this, because obviously we're already mentioning the name of the person that's messaging you, so maybe we can identify which application it's coming from. Or what we can do is we can have the image of the person here, and we can have the application here. So the application can signify, or we can have the application, if you don't have a lot of applications, we can have the application here. And obviously I want to reduce the size just to make it similar to the image that we have on the right. So again, probably something like this. So we can have something like this, and let me just make it 222. So we have 10, 10, 10, and we can have something like this. Now what happens when you actually tap on it? So I'm actually just going to remove this because I want to show that from scratch. So I'm just going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to say if I tap on this particular thing, I want you to go here. Then it's really simple. I just need to move this out, and I can obviously hide it as well, remove the opacity, and I can move this out and I can remove the opacity as well. So once we've done that, as you can see, the opacity is 0 on both these things. Now what's really important is you need to preserve the location of the camera. Obviously you can't really change that because the camera notch is going to be in the same place. So you can press Command and then you can resize it. Now as you can see from the top, it's 34. So maybe we can keep it 35 on the edges as well. Sorry, it's 35 at the top, so we can keep it 35 on the edges as well. So let's just go ahead and actually make it 35 here. So this is 35 from here, and I actually accidentally moved the camera. So let's just go ahead and not move it. So in order to not move it, I think the best thing would be to actually just place it at the top so it's not in the container. So now this is not 35, so let's just move it to 35, 36, and this should be 35. Yes, this is 35 now. Let's just go ahead and move it here as well. So this should be 30, 37, and 2 minus, that's 35. Okay, sorry, that is 35. So now that we have that, we can just resize it, and I'm not sure what the actual size is going to be, so we can actually just check that out in the file as well that that I picked it from. So the size is going to be somewhere around 60, so we can just use that. And if you want to obviously check out how it looks directly, we can go ahead and actually check it out here as well. So so if you tap on it, so as you can see, the sizes vary. I think they're not the same. So as you can see, this size is a bit larger. So it completely depends upon you as to what size you want to keep. But again, probably the interaction can be something like this. And as you can see, this is a rounded rectangle. If the size is smaller, it can be a sort of a oval, or I'm not even sure what the name of that shape is, but you get the idea. Okay, so now we can update the image. Since we're using circular images on Mattermost, I'm going to keep the circular pattern here as well. We can probably increase the image size to 64. I think that's fine. We can have the name at the top. First of all, what I want to do is, let me just go ahead and actually move this logo out as well. So 64, then we're going to position everything at the top. Now the top doesn't look good, or maybe it's fine. We just need to increase the spacing from the top, so probably from all the sides. So this should be 24 from the edges, or maybe it can be 16, 24, or just 16 in general. So the edges can be 16. Then we have the name, and then we can have the message. I'm gonna put these two in an auto layout, just gonna move these at the bottom, and I am gonna just type the name, Andrew Bling. And then we have, actually I have an employee named Andrew, like I have a colleague Andrew Brown, so I can just use that. And then I have a text area here which I can then just include with Lorem Ipsum. So I'm just going to generate 3 sentences here, and I think this should be pretty much okay. I'm going to move the image at the top, and let's just go ahead and actually reduce the size here as well, and maybe the opacity so it can be slightly smaller, and the line height should actually be 1.5 or something, so 150%. So I think this probably is okay. I'm just going to remove this auto layout and move this to hug, and I can move this whole container to hug as well. This shouldn't be fixed, this should also be hug, and maybe we can make this semi-bold. So this should be the name. We should actually rename it. So this is the name. Similarly, this should be the name. This should convert into a name. And then we have this logo here. So this is going to be our app logo. Let's just rename it. So it's usually better to actually rename things appropriately. And then I'm going to make it absolute positioning, and I'm just going to move it here instead. I think this probably looks good. So again, similarly here, app logo. So the names should be consistent, app logo, so that's fine. So now once you have that done, you can probably just go ahead and add a tab. So I've already added a tab. It should be quick, smart animate, and then quick. And let's just see how this looks. So if I tap on it, as you can see, this is looking good. Everything actually goes off, and I think this is fine. So that's pretty much how you actually create the interaction. One thing, however, that you can notice is that these devices or these icons are actually going on this black border as well. We don't want them to go on this black border, right? In order to prevent that, we just need to move these things into a frame. So we can just see, okay, we can create a frame. I'm just going to create a frame here. So as you can see, let's just quickly create a frame here and give it a color so we can see it. So here's the color. Let's just go ahead and actually make the border radius pretty similar to what we have on the device. I think something like this. So here's the frame, and we don't really need to do much here. What we just need to do here is, so actually I created, so yeah, here is the frame. I'm just going to move it up, and we're gonna go ahead and actually remove the background here, and we're gonna drag anything that we want actually in this. So we're gonna have the notch in there, we're gonna have everything in there, that's fine. If we hide it, as you can see, these things are hiding, but the right side is not hiding, so let's just include that as well. This is our container, and let's just go ahead and actually have the same container here as well. So I'm just gonna paste this container. As you can see, most of these things are already in there, so we don't have to do anything about that. What we only need to do is, actually, I can just go ahead and copy this whole frame. So actually this is the thing that contains the text. So I'm gonna replace the island here. We're gonna remove this island. The right side is just gonna go off screen, and then we have the time that's gonna go off screen from here as well. I also missed one minor thing, which is why, and don't mind name changes, I just changed the name and the image. But I actually forgot to place the camera on the right side. So as you can see, the camera is here. So I can just go ahead, select the frame, and then just place the camera. Obviously that's not going to work. I have to select the whole frame and then place the camera, and that's going to place it exactly in the position that it's here. So that's pretty much it. Let me know what you think. And if we actually go and look at the prototype view, you click on it, that looks good. The notch remains in the same position, and I think it's fine. So let me know if there's any other feedback, comments. Let me know what you think about this whole, I actually keep on forgetting what this is, dynamic island. Let me know what you think about it, what your thoughts are. Again, I'm not necessarily against it, but I'm just bewildered by the fact as to how many people are fanboying over this. I can argue that maybe if this particular feature, exactly the way it is, was introduced by any of the Android competitors, maybe like Sony, LG, Hawaii, whatever it is, I'm pretty sure they wouldn't have gotten as much traction as this particular thing. So I mean, it's just a huge bias, in my opinion, of people who use Apple. And some people, I myself am an Apple user. I use my MacBook. I have an iPhone device, and I have another MacBook here. So I'm pretty much like an all in all, go through and through Apple user. But I mean, I at the very least don't have as strong of a bias like some of the other people. So that's going to be pretty much it, and let me know what you think.